say a few words too.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually wrote out a few things because I might get a little emotional. But there's a few things that I want to say today. I appreciate all of you being here, and I recognize that this is a little bit tedious, perhaps, but I appreciate the attention. 16 years ago, next month, I stood in the House chamber. And I took an oath of office to serve as a member of the Oregon House of Representatives. In the years that followed, the voters in Washington County have given me the distinct honor and privilege, really the privilege of serving not only in the House of Representatives for 2 terms, but in the Oregon Senate for 3. As all of you are aware, I'd hope very much to have the privilege to continue to serve the next 4 years here in this chamber. The voters, however, by the narrowest of margins, had other plans. And while I am certainly disappointed with their decision, I respect it. And I fully understand what the late, great Governor Vic Tatia meant when he often said that one of his enduring lessons for politicians is that depending upon the voters, you can one day be a peacock and the next day a feather duster. Mr. President, friends, colleagues, I can't predict what the future will bring, but I do know that this might be my final opportunity ever to speak in this historic chamber. And today I want to just share a few thoughts. First, again, I just want to thank the voters in Washington County. I am so grateful to have had the honor to serve here, to serve with each of you. It's such a pleasure. I mean, there's 30 of us that have the opportunity to sit in these chairs. And for my constituents to entrust me with this seat for this period of time has been the greatest honor of my life. I also want to thank each of you. Both sides of the aisle, my own caucus mates, friends that relationships that we've built across the aisle, I think are extraordinary. Surely we haven't agreed all the time. I haven't agreed with my own caucus a lot of the time. But we have always worked together. And there's never been a moment when I haven't questioned your integrity and why you do what you do, believing that you're doing what's right for the state of Oregon. Most importantly, Mr. President, I want to thank my family. Public service has immense benefits, there's no question. But there's also cost. It's not really a family-friendly endeavor that we engage in here on the Senate floor or in the House side. The hours are long, the time away from family is often a lot. There's days when we're in session when I would leave before everyone in the House got up, and I'd come home before or after everybody had gone to bed. And then throw on top of that really, really fun campaigns in competitive districts. My wife and my 2 kids have been incredibly patient, incredibly forgiving, and loving. And there's no way that I could have done this job without their support. I'm also hoping that I'll be around a little bit more in the next several months, so I look forward to spending more time with them, and I hope they don't get tired of me. My kids are here on the side aisle, and they've grown up in this building. They've grown up in this place. My kids were Senator George's kids' age and size when I started. In fact, my son was born in June of my first session. There's a story behind that. I won't tell the story now, but it's an interesting one, and it could only have happened with a female speaker. But my kids, we had 2 rules when they were in the building. 2 rules. One rule, they couldn't leave the building. They could go anywhere in the building they wanted to go. They couldn't leave the building. The rule number 2 was they had to go together. They had to stay together. They couldn't separate. They explored this building as only children can. And they had a get out of free jail card because all they had to do is say, well, my dad's Senator Starr, or my dad's Representative Starr, and who's gonna get them in trouble? And I tell you, I bet to this day they can still tell you which offices had the best candy dishes. I won't forget my mom and dad. My dad, who served selflessly in this legislature for 14 years. I think many who remember that service will still consider him the conscience of the Senate, perhaps of the entire legislature. There's no question that he created a path for public service for me. There's no question about that. My mom, who's sitting on the side aisle, many of you know because she's served right next to me for 16 years. She's helped, she's assisted, she's encouraged, she's advised me really every step along the way in this journey. As I look back over the past 16 years, there are a few issues and a few moments that stand out in my memory. While I'm tempted to remind myself and you about all of my legislative successes and all of the opportunities that we've had over the last 16 years in great detail, I won't do that. Yes, you're welcome. But there are a couple of things that I do want to highlight because I think they're worth sharing. There's a lesson, especially in this first story, I think that's worth telling. I remember as a new first-time candidate knocking on doors, running for office in 1998, and I knocked on the door of this gentleman, and he answered the door, and give him the spiel. Please, I'm Bruce Starr, and blah blah blah. I'm running for the legislature. Ask for your vote in November, and he engaged me, and not, as we've all campaigned, not everybody engages you, but this gentleman engaged me in a conversation. And he asked a question. He said, did I know anything about the law that provides shields for Oregonians, parents who don't provide adequate medical care for their children based on the premise that all they need to do is pray for their kids? I thought, I never heard of that before. Well, he talked to me about it and told me his story and told me how, because of the actions of parents that he trusted as a child, he suffered the rest of his life. As a freshman, I introduced a bill to remove those shields in the law. Co-sponsor was Representative Lowe, who represented Oregon City, part of Oregon City District. That bill ultimately became law, obviously with amendments, but it couldn't have happened. Actually, what happened was Kevin Mannix was the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House at the time, and he moved a bill that I didn't support because in my mind it didn't go far enough. And so I, as a majority member in the House, supported a minority report on my own bill coming to the House floor. And between the time it was reported out of committee and got to the House floor, Representative Mannix had changed his mind, and actually the minority report on the House floor became the majority report. And ultimately, with the help of Senator Neil Bryant in the Senate, who's the Senate chair of Judiciary at the time, my little priority bill as a freshman legislator passed. And today, it's still the law of the land. And today, I know, and many of you were here and had the opportunity to vote for those bills, and some of you were probably in the Judiciary Committee at the time that helped to get them passed. But I know that that piece of legislation has saved lives. And I think the lesson too here for all of you who are going to continue to serve is don't discount that freshman legislator who's got a great idea, because ultimately they maybe have an idea you hadn't thought of before, and ultimately can change the lives of Oregonians. That's part of the responsibility, I think, of senators, of senior members. A few more highlights. I'm not going to go into great detail. The 1999 transportation package, freshman legislator, it's a great story. Someday I'll tell you about it, but there were 3 freshmen in the House of Representatives who basically helped to suspend the rules to get the thing passed after it failed on concurrence twice. The 2001, the opportunity to chair the House Transportation Committee and begin the process of putting Oregon back on track as it relates to transportation funding, the OTA 1, 2, and 3 bills that passed over subsequent sessions. The opportunity to play a role in Connect Oregon, the Jobs and Transportation Act, as the Senate President has already identified. The Road User Fee Task Force, that really has set Oregon on a tact to, and a leadership leadership track to change the way that not only Oregon but the nation will fund its highway transportation infrastructure, recognizing that the fuel tax isn't a source that's going to work forever. And I'm very, very proud of that and the opportunity there. The homeschool legislation that I sponsored and got passed in '99 that freed homeschool families from onerous regulation. The charter school bill, I actually wrote the first charter school bill when I was staff to my dad. I get elected, it's 4 sessions later. Because of what happened in the House at the time, I got a seat on the House Education Committee and had the opportunity to vote a charter school bill out of committee. The Amber Alert legislation that the Senate President and I co-sponsored, Jessica's Law, legislation that relates to encouraging alternative fuels, and there's just so many other things that I've had the opportunity to do that's really, really makes me proud of the opportunity to have served in this chamber and in this assembly. There are individuals I know in the gallery and some that are watching this proceeding that had front row seats to many of these successes, former legislators who are no longer here, members of the lobby, some of whom have been and continue to be trusted friends and advisor. I want to thank them, and I want to thank, because reality is not only did they help us get things done, but they helped Oregon become a better place. I also want to recognize the work that's been done since my time in the Senate in the Business and Transportation Committee. That's what it's called today. I think it was Transportation Economic Development at one other point. I'm so grateful for the working relationships that we've had in that committee. Really, in the 2 chairs that I've had the privilege to work with, Senator Rick Metzger and Senator Lee Byer, 2 leaders who allowed me the opportunity to help change Oregon for the better. They gave me freedom, flexibility. Some of my crazy ideas that they said those are too crazy, we can't do those things. But ultimately worked alongside of me and all of the members of that committee. And Mr. President, your willingness to have a committee that is equal Republicans and Democrats, that forces us to work together in a bipartisan manner. And my history and my experience in this building, that's how the best policy occurs. Mr. President, also just wanted to publicly thank you for your support as I worked my way through the leadership at the National Conference of State Legislatures. My involvement in NCSL is really one of the highlights of my legislative service. Having the honor to serve as the 41st president of NCSL, only the 2nd Oregonian to serve and have that honor has been absolutely rewarding. That opportunity absolutely would not have been afforded me without your support, so thank you. As I've been around this process for 28 years as an elected legislator, as a staff, or as an intern, it's my experience that the best public policy is the policy that's made where both the minority and the majority voice are heard, where there's both are a seat at the table, where compromises are made. And I believe that's what Oregonians expect from us. I think that's what they deserve. Each of us are only here temporarily. None of us have a birthright to a seat in the Oregon Senate. None of us do. Even you, Mr. President, none of us have a lifelong opportunity to be here. We're only temporary stewards of these seats. And I'm extraordinarily proud of having the opportunity and the service that I've had. So grateful I've been given this privilege. So, Mr. President, as the scripture tells us, there's a time for everything. And there's a season for every activity under the heavens. My season in this chamber is over for now. I leave the legislature as I entered it 16 years ago, with support and love of my family, with respect for those who enter the public arena, and with an undying love for this corner of the earth called Oregon. Thank you, Mr. President.